quilty friend, it's Carolina Moore, your favorite sewing and quilting YouTuber, and today we are going to use the June Tailor Quilt As You Go kit along with my box bag die to make a really cute tote bag. You ready? Let's get started. The links to everything that you need are going to be down in the description box, but we're going to be using the AccuQuilt 2 die set for the box bag die. This is the die that I designed for AccuQuilt, and it makes box corners as well as curve corners. We're going to use the box corner die in order to make our placemats into a tote bag. And that's right, I said placemats. This is the Alberta Skies placemat set from June Tailor. It comes with 4 placemats. We're just going to make 2 of them today, and those 2 are going to be the basis for our tote bag. So we're going to start by making the placemats, and then once we finish the placemats, we're going to turn that into a really quick and easy tote. I love this method for making bags because you get to piece your full bag together, like your pieced bag, and then you turn it into a bag. So it's super easy. We're going to start with this placemat set. So the June Tailor Quilt As You Go set of 4 Alberta Skies placemats. It comes with your instruction sheet, and it comes with this pre-printed batting. We're going to open this up. Before I get too far, again, all the links to everything you need are going to be down below, but we're going to be using fabric, and so I've already pre-cut my fabric based on the instructions, and then we're going to use some straps, and then we're going to also cut fabric the finished size of the placemats, which is about 19 by 15, and that's going to be our lining fabric for our tote. So let's start by opening this up, and this has 4 placemats in it. We only need 2, so I'm going to cut this apart, and I can keep the other 2 to either turn into placemats or to turn into a second tote if I want. Or I suppose I could turn it into something completely different. I don't know what else. Feel free to leave a comment down below if you have a fun idea for what else you might turn these placemats into. There are, I guess you could sew 2 together and turn them into a table runner. There's really lots of options. Okay. So I'm cutting these apart. That gives me 1 right here and a second one right here. Now these are pre-printed. You can see the printing right here on the batting. I'm going to flip this around so that I have it the right side, or like the right side up facing me. So my number 1 is down here, and you can follow the instructions on the instruction sheet, which comes with it. But once you get the hang of it, it's really just following the numbers right on here. So I start by putting fabric number 1 down, and the instructions told me exactly what size to cut these, and I just line them right up, right on here, and everything will line up beautifully. Look at that. And then I'm going to take a fabric number 2, and that will also line up beautifully. And look, they've given me line up lines. Let me put this in the middle so you can see it even better. They've given me lines for where I line up this fabric number 2, and when I stitch this with just a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance, it's going to flip over, and it's going to become one of my background points for my flying geese block. So fabric 1, fabric 2, fabric 3, and I'm going to keep going, adding 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and so on through this whole piece. Now you can't lay out all the pieces of fabric at once. You have to lay them out one at a time, and then you put your piece of fabric down, you stitch it, then you put your piece of fabric down, you stitch it, you flip it, you finger press it, and then you keep going. So it's super simple to do. I'm going to swap out my presser foot because I've done this once before. This was a Quilt As You Go that I did before. I also did a really cute Quilt As You Go zippered pouch using the mug rugs from June Tailor, and I learned that having the 1/4 inch guide on my presser foot got in the way. It got hung up in the batting, so I want to switch out my presser foot for one where I don't have the guide on there, and that's just going to make it a little easier when piecing this all together. Okay, I have the right foot on there. I have my fabric 1 and my fabric 2 on my my pre-printed batting, and now I can go ahead and put this underneath the sewing machine, and then using that 1/4 inch or just scant 1/4 inch seam allowance, I can go ahead and sew. And when you get to the end, it's not a bad idea when you do quilt as you go to just do a couple stitches back and a couple stitches forward, and that just locks your stitches in. And when you lock those stitches, it's just going to hold them in place a little bit better. That seems less likely to pop open. Okay, so first seam done, putting fabrics 1 and 2 together, and now it should line up right there. Now I can do fabric 3, same way, line up the pieces, put a pin, bring this to my sewing machine, and this is my Baby Lock Jubilant. There's not a ton of throat space. Throat space is this space over here to the side, the right side of the needle. But there's plenty for squishing up this project. You just kind of squish it in, and it's fine. You don't need a big, huge machine to do a quilt as you go. Now, is a big, huge machine nice with lots of throat space? Sure it is. That's why people get them, is because they really are lovely. But you don't have to have one. There's so much that you can do with a smaller machine, which is why, although I do have a big Baby Lock Ballad, I like doing most of my videos on the Baby Lock Jubilant so that you can really see that just about everything that I do, it's easy enough to do on a smaller machine. You don't have to get some big fancy machine to quilt. You don't have to wait until you can afford a machine that's thousands of dollars to be able to quilt. Okay, so I have my first flying geese block done. You can see right here. And then we're just going to keep going the same way. So this is number 4. And it's going to get put right on here. This is funny. It'll end up right there. But it's going to start out right there. There we go. On those different points. And these points must be for when I do numbers 5 and 6. That makes sense. Okay. So I do like putting a little pin right here just to keep it from shifting. Bring it over to the sewing machine. And sew this one down. And I forgot to lock my stitches there. It's not the end of the world, but if you can remember, it'll just give you some extra security. There are sometimes where it's worth going back and fixing it if you forgot to lock stitches. Here, it's just extra security. It's not like crucial to the quilt or to the project. And especially since this is going to be in a bag, I'm not as worried about it. It's got a lining that behind it will help protect it. Okay. So we have fabric 4 that'll press right into place. There we go. And we're going to keep going, adding all of our flying geese blocks. All right, there we go. I have all my little flying geese units done. Those look so cute. Okay, so these are done. That brings me up to 18. So now I'm going to add 19 and 20, which are my little strips on either side. And those, they go the same way. So 19 is this strip right here. I'm going to take my accent strip. It's going to end up this direction. I'm going to flip it right side together. And it's going to go right here. So I'm going to stitch that one on. And then I can go ahead and stitch 20 on as well. And I can finger press both at the same time. And then I just need to do 21 and 22. And this whole side is done. So let's go ahead and stitch them on. This whole process so far has been, it's about 20 minutes of sewing that I've done, give or take. So it's really not that tedious or time consuming. It's best, it feels like paint by number, but with fabric. So it's really quick and easy, super beginner friendly, great for someone who hasn't done like free motion quilting or quilting on their own projects. Quilt As You Go lets you have a fully quilted finished project without having to learn quilting. This is kind of like a intermediate step before you learn to quilt your own quilts. You can quilt as you go your own projects. And you may find that you fall so in love with Quilt As You Go that you don't need to that you don't want to do anything else, and that's okay. Quilt As You Go is allowed. And if you do love quilting your own projects, you can add more quilting. This is a basic amount of quilting that will keep your project together, but there's nothing that says you can't quilt it more. It just lets you have the base amount of quilting needed to keep the project together at the same time that you're piecing it. So it kills two birds with one stone. And this time I didn't pin. I just went for it. Should be okay. Let's take a look. I've got my two accent stripes on there. Nice. And then I need fabric 21, which I end up using the same pink background fabric for fabric 21. Compared to the picture on the front. So this was the picture that they did. I felt like this green didn't pop as much. I mean, it looks really cute. And then they use the same kind of fabric for the flying geese as their background. And I use the same for the background of my flying geese and the background of the placemat. Okay. So 21 is going to end up right there. Flip it right sides together. There we go. So I'm going to stitch this. I'm not going to pin this one either. So we'll just go ahead and stitch this one. And stitch 22, which is the other side. And then we'll take a look at our finished tail topper. Or I guess not table topper, placemat. That's what this is. It's placemat. All right. So this is finger pressing that last seam. I didn't finger press the second to last seam yet. There we go. That is one side of the tote bag. I think it's gonna look super cute. Okay, so this can get squared up, and then I'm going to make the other side of the tote bag and grab my lining pieces for this bag. Now I'm going to square this up just to the edges of the fabric, So, or the edges of where those blue lines are, that's where this is going to get squared up to. And then same with the second one. And then I'm going to cut my lining pieces to the size that these ended up at. I didn't cut those lining pieces yet because the instructions said it was about, and so I wanted to, rather than cut my pieces too small, wait till I sewed these, cut these to size, cut my lining pieces to the same size, and then we will put the tote bag together, which will be pretty quick, doing our box corners. Yeah. So I will be back in just a second with the finished second side and my lining pieces. Alright, so I have my bag outsides done. I have my bag linings squared up to the size of my bag outsides, and we're going to go ahead and box our corners. Now, boxing the corners is what gives depth to a bag. Because this outside already has this batting on it, now the batting isn't super stiff, this is going to give it about the weight of like a canvas tote bag. So it's not going to be like a big sturdy tote in terms of like stiff and boxy, but it's going to be like a canvas tote that is going to be a little bit floppy, but it's going to be able to hold quite a few things inside. Okay, so we have the box bag die. It's a 2-die set. We're going to use just the box corner die for this project. And then I'm using my AccuQuilt Go because it has a lot more space here on the side than my little Go Me to be able to run projects through. And I'll start with one of my outside pieces here. And I want to make sure this is smooth and flat, because these have a tendency to shift on the batting a little bit. Okay, so this, I guess I could decide here if I wanted my arrows to point down versus up, and I actually kind of like that. I think that looks really interesting, having my arrows go down, my flying geese be down instead of up. So I'm going to do that just for fun. I'm going to fold this in half. And then I want a good size box corner on this, so I'm going to box these at 2 inches. So I have this folded in half. And I'm going to bring it to the 2-inch mark here and the 2-inch mark here. And then I only need a little mat because I only need the mat to cover the parts of the blade that we're using. Unlike most AccuQuilt dies, most of my project is off the die, so that makes this a little unusual. And then I can start running it through up until the point where that mat is. And then once it starts getting up here close, I can fold this up and tuck it in so that it goes kind of under there. Once the whole die is through, I can pull it back and I have my box corners. Okay, so I want to do the exact same with the other outside. And the question is, do I want this one facing, ooh, you know what would be fun? If this one was facing up and this one was facing down, then it would end up being like a wrap all the way around the bag. So I'm just redesigning this bag on the fly, no big deal. Okay, so this one's going to go up, the other one's going to go down, and that way everything's going to line up, and that's going to be super fun. Again, I'm going to do a 2-inch box corner. I'm going to pull this in a little more so that you can see. And I'm going to fold it in half. That allows me to box both bottom corners at the same time. I'm lining this up with my 2-inch and my 2-inch here. Anything that shifted, I'm going to move back. I'll put my little mat right on top. And then run that through. Once it's all the way through, I can pull it back out. And I have my other 2 box corners. Now I just need to box the corners on the lining. So when I box the corners on the lining, because they are, and now I've separated them out, but they're just fabric. They're just single layers of fabric. There's no batting. So I can actually go through 4 layers at once. 4 layers of the fabric. So I'll fold this in half. This fabric is not directional. If it was, I'd want to pay attention so that the top of the fabric didn't have the box corners. The box corners were on the bottom. But this is going to be my lining, and I would want it right side up, but it's not directional, so I'm not worried about it. I'll line those up with the 2 and the 2. I'll take my mat, put it on top, make sure those blades are covered, push it in, and then when I get to the point that this starts to tug it all, I can just tuck this in. So I can tuck right next to it. There we go. Once it's all the way through, pull them apart. And I have the box corners, which are actually the bottom corners of the lining. All right, so now I'm going to sew the box corners. I get to move this AccuQuilt out of the way. Start with the lining, but all of them are going to get boxed. We'll do this. Here we go. So here's my lining and here's a box corner. I'm going to take it and fold it so that I fold the box corner in half. And then I'm going to sew this with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, locking my stitches here and here. So I'm going to take it to my sewing machine. And then here you absolutely want to lock your stitches at the beginning and end. If you take a look, this is that lining corner, and it now has that 3D pop to it. I'm going to do it again. Take this corner, fold it in half, bring it over to the sewing machine, so locking those stitches at both the beginning and end of the seam. That's really important. If you forget that, it's worth going back and going over the seam again so you can lock those stitches, because if you don't lock the stitches here, then what will happen is when this gets flipped over, this will be able to pop open, and we don't want that. So that is one lining piece. I've got both the corners boxed. I'm going to go ahead and repeat that process on the other lining piece as well as both of the outside pieces. So it's a total of 8 box corners, 2 on each piece, and I have 2 lining pieces and 2 outside pieces. So start, lock your stitches, go, lock your stitches, and then these pieces are big enough that you can just chain them if you want. So do one after the other without cutting between them. This is a little bit more advanced step. So if you're not ready to do this, that's fine. Just stop between each, get yourself set up for success, and then sew the next one. Sewing bags is not a race. Sewing bags, you want them to look good. I do like going fast so I can, enjoy my bag sooner, but it's not a contest. We're not trying to be the fastest person to make a bag. We want to make a good bag. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and box the rest of these corners, and then we'll be back when we have our pieces ready to go. All right, we have all our pieces. It's time to add our straps and put everything all together. Our lining pieces can get sewn together. We just put them right sides together, and then we sew all the way around, leaving a good 6-inch hole or so at the bottom to be able to turn the bag right side out. So we'll do that first. If you are a pinner, you can absolutely pin this. I am not going to pin because I don't love pinning if I can help it. So I'm going to start here by a couple stitches forward, a couple stitches back, just to lock this. And then I guess this is kind of like finger pinning, where I find the next most important spot, which is these corners to line up. I'm going to hold those with my fingers while I go ahead and sew this all the way around. 1/4 inch seam allowance on everything. line up my next set of corners. I do want to remember to keep a hole at the bottom here for turning. If I don't do that, then I will end up having to seam rip myself a hole in the bottom for turning, and I have done that before. It's much less fun. So it's better if I can remember, just give myself a hole for turning now. Alright, lock my stitches at this end as well. There we go. Okay. Now before I sew these other two pieces together, which are my outside pieces, I want to make sure that I have marked where my handles are going to go. Okay, so I'm going to line this up with the edge here, and I want my handle, oh, wouldn't it be fun to have it right there? That's fun. Alright, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in. Give myself a mark. And then the other side, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is a pink marking pen on pink fabric, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's fine. And then same with the other. Let's look. So those will be the center marks for my straps, and the straps will look kind of like that when they're put on. Now that I've marked my straps, which is way easier to do when it's laying flat before I sew the two sides together, I can sew my two sides together. I did the lining without pinning, but this can shift a lot because of that batting, so I'm going to go ahead and pin this one at least at my corners. Because if the lining corners don't line up quite right, well, it's in the lining, no one's ever going to know. But if the outer corners are off, that's going to be on the outside of the bag, and it's going to be a bit more obvious. So, here we go. Okay. So now same thing here. Bring it to the sewing machine. This is going to be the same as the lining, except instead of leaving a hole for turning, we are not going to leave a hole for turning. And you want to be a little gentle with your sewing machine. This is 2 layers of batting and 2 layers of fabric. It is a lot for some sewing machines to go through. My Baby Lock Jubilant is handling it like a champ here. So because this has the Quilt As You Go batting, and it's possible for my layers to have shifted, I want to just double check all of my side seams here to make sure that none of the fabric shifted at all, because it could have shifted and I could have only sewn the batting and not sewn layers of fabric together, and then I would have a hole in my bag. And now's the time to find that out, because now would be the time that it'd be easier to fix that. Also, oh my gosh, how cute is this bag? Look, and it goes all the way around. So here at the bottom, that doesn't line up perfectly. I can choose to fix that if I want. I'm going to choose to just let it go. I'm fine with it. I love how these two stripes just perfectly, it's like I planned it. They perfectly go down one side. This bag is going to be super cute. I'm so excited. Okay, let me turn it back inside out. There we go. And I'm going to attach the straps. Okay, so pinning the straps, I gave myself those marks, one right here. And I actually want to have my strap stick out about 1/4 inch. I find that works best. It keeps everything from shifting, or if it does shift, that way you don't lose the security of the strap. And then I'm going to find the middle on the other side, also leaving that about 1/4 inch out. And I cut myself 20-inch straps for this, which should be a good size for this tote and for the width that these straps are apart. So these are just 20-inch pieces of strapping. I'm going to flip it over and do the same on the other side. And when you attach your straps, you want to make sure so that it's straight right here, and I've got my index fingers on top, that both those index finger sides are the sides that touch the outer fabric. So you're not getting any twists in it. And I'll show you how you can double check that in a second. So I've got one side pinned, other side find that middle, give myself a good 1/4 inch sticking out. Okay, and here's how I can double check. I'm going to take my finger on the top of the strap. I'm going to keep my finger on that same side, and when I get to the other side, my finger should still be on top. If something happens and my finger ends up on the bottom of the strap, then I've gotten a twist in it accidentally. Okay, so I have all 4 ends of my strap pinned, and I'm going to take my lining, put it right side out, and tuck it inside the bag. Now I can take my side seams, line those up, and pin. Side seam on the other side. So this is the side seam on the outside and the side seam on the lining. I'm lining them up. I put one in one direction and one in the other direction to nest that seam. And then I give it a pin. And now I can smooth out this lining. You can add another pin just here in the middle. You can add as many pins as you want around this outside to keep it nice and smooth. And make it easy for you to sew. So you can add more pins if you want. I'm going to keep it just at these pins. So it's really 4 holding the bag together, and I've got 8 on the straps. But more pins is never a bad thing. And now we're going to bring it over to the sewing machine. Now, something that is super handy for sewing machines like this is that has a free arm, which means that I can pull this front off, and I'll show you what that looks like from the front of the sewing machine. So this part right here, this front, can come off, and that gives an opening right here so that I can slide the bag over the opening, and that gives me a nice smooth surface to sew. So I want to make sure that my edges of my lining and my outside are lined up. And we're going to sew all the way around with a 1/4 inch seam allowance and just our regular stitch length. And when I get to pins, I don't stitch over my pins, I remove the pin before I get to it. There we go. And then when it starts to bunch up like this, you just start pulling the rest kind of under and through. And as you have less pins on your project, there'll be less things get caught up. These pins will sometimes get caught up on the underside of your sewing machine. You might have to untangle them, that's okay. There we go. Alright, I'm just going to sew all the way around. Now if you think your bag is going to see a lot of wear, then you may want to do a zigzag here on these straps. The presser foot that I have on right now isn't going to do well with a zigzag, so I'm just going to actually go back and forth a little bit. Though a zigzag would be a really good choice. But I've gone inside the seam allowance, just kind of, I guess it's kind of a zigzag, it's just horizontal instead of vertical. But go back and forth inside that seam allowance just to give it some extra strength at those straps. Now comes my absolute favorite part of making a bag, which is turning the whole thing right side out. So I'm going to reach inside here through that hole that we left in the lining, and I didn't cut those threads when I skipped that hole, so let me cut that to give myself actual space. Put my hand in, reach all the way down to the bottom, and bring the bag straight out. If you didn't leave your hole in the bottom wide enough, if you didn't leave it big enough, you can rip out some stitches on the side. I'm going to do that real quick. Here with scissors carefully, just pop a couple stitches to give it an easier time to push through. There we go. And I can tuck the lining in. And I can find my box corners on both sides. Okay, so there's 2 steps left. The one is to close the hole, which is usually what I do very, very last. And then the other is to top stitch around the top. And so the way that we do this is we start by pinning carefully around this top edge. So lining up the lining and the outside so it's nice and clean, and the lining isn't doing a peekaboo on the front. The easiest spot to do this is at the handles. Although this one, the front and the lining match up, so that wouldn't be too bad. Here we go. And feel free to use lots of pins. It's so easy for this to shift, and to have a bright lining like this. This really bright teal is going to really show from the front if it isn't tucked in. If you have a choice, or if you kind of don't have a choice of having the 2 edges line up, you'd rather have the outside go in just a little bit than have the lining go out. But usually you give kind of fuss with it, pinch it, and you can get it to behave. And then we're going to top stitch around the top. Now when I top stitch around the top, I like to use a bigger stitch length. I think that a bigger stitch length looks nicer. You can also go around twice. I think that going around twice and giving a double stitch that is evenly stitched, and even width apart, so about 1/8 of an inch apart, looks really nice. And then also I'm going to change out my thread color for my top stitch. I had an orange thread on there from a past project that I did. I'm going to want a pink thread to be able to match what I have going here. Okay, I just need to top stitch around this. You want to be careful not to accidentally stitch your handles down, so make sure they're up and out of the way. And we're going to put this over the machine again. So this underneath part is going to go under, and this other part's going to go over, so we'll go around that free arm on the machine. And then find yourself a nice inconspicuous spot to start. Right here by this handle with my pink thread will be good, because I want to start about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge. Do a couple stitches forward, a couple stitches back just to lock that end in place. And then I'm going to stitch about 1/8 of an inch from the edge all the way around. Once you've made it all the way around, you can stop and start your new line of stitching, but I like to just bring it over and continue along. And so if the first one was 1/8 of an inch away, then this one will be 1/4 inch away, which is a lot easier to guide with my 1/4 inch foot. And also there's no pins to move out of the way and no edges to worry about. So the second like victory lap around tends to go a bit faster. And then once this is done, the last step is to sew that hole closed in the lining. I'm always tempted to just leave it and think, oh, I'll get back to that later. I never do. I always think I'm going to get back to it. I never ever do. And then I end up with a hole in the lining of my bag for months or years. So I've learned to just go ahead and close up the hole in the lining right away. And that way I don't have to worry about it later. By the way, this second line of stitching also gives extra stability for your handles because you have now 2 rows of stitching, and the second row of stitching, if you had a good 1/4 inch, can sometimes catch the end of that handle as well. Alright, once I get back to the beginning, couple stitches back, couple stitches forward to lock those stitches in place. I'm going to go ahead and cut my threads. My handle is wrapped around, there we go. It looks so great. Such a great tote. Okay, I'm going to sew this hole closed. I'm going to sew closed now. Just going to get it done. Bring the lining out. I'll show you how easy this is. I'm going to take that lining, and I take the seam that the hole is in, and I'll line up that seam. Come here. Line up that seam. Make sure that lining is tucked in. Tucked in well. And then just finger press that. And I do still have pink thread on here, but I'm fine with that. No one's ever going to see the stitching in the bottom of the lining. They're really not. No one's going to look at my project that closely. Oh, I still have my stitch length set to the top stitch length. Just want to make sure to have it at my regular, like 2.5. And then stitch all the way to the end and a little past. And lock those stitches. And I double check that I caught everything on both sides. Looks like I did. Caught that hole closed. Cut my threads. The lining can get tucked back inside. And I have a finished tote. Friends, let me know what you think of this video, if you enjoyed this, if this is a tote that you would make. I think it makes a great gift. It looks, you know, fancy because it's quilted, but it's quilt as you go, so it went together really easy. You can make 2 from that June Tailor pack, so that's, love that, 2, done, boom. And it didn't take forever at all. Give this video a thumbs up. Let people know that you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or comments, leave those down below. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel. But of course you already are, because of course you are, right? Friends, that's it for today. I'll see you right here real soon. Bye for now.